Millionaire CEO freezes when he sees a humble mother playing the piano at a restaurant, the same song he once taught his first love. Don't forget to comment where you're watching from. Your support means everything. Enjoy the story. The Sapphire. Restaurant glowed with understated elegance that evening. Soft blue lighting reflecting off crystal glasses. Hushed conversations punctuated by the occasional gentle laugh and the subtle clink of fine silverware against porcelain plates. It was the kind of establishment where business empires changed hands over dessert and champagne, where the elite of the city came not to be seen, but to conduct affairs away from prying eyes. Nathan Reynolds sat alone at his corner table, his tailored navy suit setting him apart even in this gathering of the city's wealthy. At 30, he had already accomplished what most men spent lifetimes pursuing, turning his family's struggling technology company into Reynolds Innovations, now valued at billions. Tonight should have been a celebration. The Anderson merger was finally complete after months of negotiation. Yet as he swiped through contract details on his tablet, Nathan felt the familiar emptiness that success never seemed to fill. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, sharp jawline, intense blue eyes that financial magazines called calculating, and light brown hair precisely cut to project authority. The image of achievement, and utterly alone. Another. "McAllen, Mr. Reynolds?" The server appeared silently at his elbow. "Please." Nathan nodded, not looking up. Then it happened. The first notes floated across the restaurant, hesitant at first, then gaining confidence. A piano melody so hauntingly familiar that Nathan's fingers froze mid-swipe. His breath caught in his throat, as the music transported him instantly across 13 years of memories. Impossible. Slowly, he turned toward the small stage in the corner where a baby grand piano stood. A woman sat there, her back straight, her dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders. Her server's uniform contrasted with the elegance of her posture as her fingers danced across the keys with practiced precision. It wasn't just any melody. It was his melody, the composition he had written as a 17-year-old boy, for a girl with warm brown eyes who had made him believe in something beyond spreadsheets and profit margins. The room seemed to tilt as the server turned slightly, her profile becoming visible in the soft light. Those same eyes now focused intently on the keys, the same gentle curve of her cheek, the same small scar near her eyebrow from a childhood fall. Sophia Hayes. The glass in Nathan's hand trembled imperceptibly as 13 years collapsed into a moment. His first love, the girl who had disappeared without a trace, the one person who had known him before he became the ruthless businessman celebrated in financial journals, and she was playing their song, the melody he had composed for her, in the last place he would have expected to find her. As the final notes hung in the air, Sophia opened her eyes, glancing around the restaurant. For one heart-stopping second, her gaze met his across the room. The recognition in her eyes was immediate. So was the shock and something else, something that made Nathan's stomach clench. Fear. "Nathan, you look like you've seen a ghost." Eric Matthews' voice cut through Nathan's trance. His executive assistant and oldest friend set down 2 tumblers of scotch, his gaze following Nathan's line of sight to the pianist who had just disappeared behind a door marked "Staff Only." "I think I have," Nathan replied, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Eric studied his friend's face, the same expression he'd seen only once before, 13 years ago, when Nathan returned from his first semester at Oxford, devastated to learn that Sophia Hayes had vanished without a trace. Wait, was that her? The girl from back then? Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Sophia?" Nathan nodded, unable to tear his eyes from the now empty piano bench. "She was playing our song, Eric. The one I wrote for her. After all this time..." Eric whistled softly. "That can't be coincidence. She saw me." Nathan's fingers tightened around his glass. "And she looked afraid." Eric had worked alongside Nathan for over 8 years, witnessing his transformation from brilliant but idealistic business school graduate to the calculating CEO whose boardroom tactics had earned him the nickname the Architect for his ability to construct and deconstruct corporate empires. Yet in this moment, Eric saw glimpses of the young man who had once composed music and recited poetry, the person Nathan had methodically buried under spreadsheets and acquisitions. "You need to talk to her," Eric said firmly. "What would I even say?" Nathan scoffed. "Sorry I disappeared from your life? She's the one who left without a word." "Did she?" Eric raised an eyebrow. "You told me you sent her letters. Did you ever confirm she received them?" Nathan fell silent. The truth was, he'd never known for certain. When he returned from Oxford for winter break that year, eager to see Sophia, he'd discovered she had quit her library job and moved away. His calls went unanswered, his letters returned unmarked. Eventually, his mother convinced him it was for the best. A college romance wouldn't have lasted anyway. "You've regretted not finding her for 13 years, Eric continued, his voice gentle but insistent. "Now she's literally 20 feet away. If you walk out that door without speaking to her, you'll regret it for 13 more. Nathan's eyes darted to his watch, an automatic gesture that made Eric sigh. The world won't collapse if the great Nathan Reynolds takes one night off from being CEO, Eric said, pushing back his chair. "I'll handle the Miller call tomorrow. Consider it my anniversary gift for 8 years of putting up with your workaholic tendencies." Before Nathan could protest, Eric stood. "I'm leaving now, which means you have the perfect excuse to stay. Find out what happened, Nathan. Because whatever it was," he gestured toward the piano, "it clearly wasn't what you thought." After Eric left, Nathan remained frozen in his seat, the untouched scotch gathering condensation on the table. His mind raced through possibilities, reconstructing the final days with Sophia before his departure for Oxford, the promises made, the futures planned. What had changed? And why was she playing their song tonight of all nights? The staff door opened, and Sophia emerged in her street clothes, dark jeans and a simple blue sweater that somehow looked more authentic on her than the designer outfits that filled the restaurant. She spoke briefly to the maitre d', then headed toward the exit. Without conscious decision, Nathan stood. 13 years of questions propelled him forward as he followed the woman who had once known him better than anyone else, before the money, before the power, before he'd locked away the parts of himself that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. Nathan paused at the restaurant entrance, watching as Sophia pulled her coat tighter against the evening chill. His heart hammered in his chest, a foreign sensation for a man who remained ice-cold during billion-dollar negotiations. What if she doesn't want to see me? The thought froze him in place. 13 years had transformed the shy music student he'd fallen for into a woman he barely recognized. There was a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself now, a hard-earned resilience that hadn't been there before. What if she's married? His eyes darted to her left hand. No ring. But that didn't mean there wasn't someone waiting for her at home. Worse still, what if she hates me for abandoning her? As he hesitated, the melody she'd played echoed in his mind. He remembered the summer afternoon he'd composed it, sitting beside Sophia at the grand piano in his mother's empty mansion. The windows had been open, a warm breeze carrying the scent of gardenias from the garden below. "Play it again," Sophia had whispered, her fingers tentatively following his across the keys. "Show me how the middle part goes." He could still feel the warmth of her shoulder against his, see the concentration in her eyes as she learned the notes, hear her laughter when she stumbled over a difficult passage. "You're a natural," he had told her. "I'm a waitress who shelves books at the library," she had corrected him, but her eyes shone with determination. But someday, Nathan swallowed hard at the memory. Someday. They had made so many plans during those stolen afternoons. She would study music while he attended Oxford. When he returned, they would build a life together, one where her talent would flourish alongside his business ambitions. What had happened to those dreams? The last conversation they'd shared played in his mind like a worn recording. "I'll write to you every week," he had promised at the airport, "and I'll be back for Christmas break." "I'll be waiting," she had replied, tears glistening in her eyes. Don't forget me among all those sophisticated English girls. He had laughed, kissing her one last time before boarding. Impossible, but when he returned 3 months later, she was gone. No forwarding address, no explanation. Just the hollow echo of unanswered questions. And now, after 13 years of building impenetrable walls around his heart, she had breached his defenses with nothing more than a melody. Sophia hailed a taxi at the curb, and Nathan knew his window was closing. If he let her leave now, he might never find the answers he'd spent years pretending not to seek. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the cool night air and called her name. Sophia. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to something more complex. Recognition mingled with what looked like fear. For a moment, he thought she might ignore him, might escape into the waiting taxi. Instead, she dismissed the cab with a wave and turned to face him fully. Hello, Nathan. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles whitened as she clutched her purse. I was wondering if you'd recognize me. You're playing our song, he replied simply. I'd know it anywhere. A shadow crossed her face. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Nor I you. He took a careful step forward. It's been a long time. 13 years, 2 months, she said, her precision catching him off guard. And now you're important. The way she said it, without admiration or resentment, just as a statement of fact, made him feel strangely hollow. Sophia, he began. What happened? Why did you? She raised her hand, stopping his words. Not here. Not now. Your shift is over? Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Sophia nodded, glancing at her watch. I just finished. I only play the piano Thursday nights after my regular hours. Just Thursdays? The question held more weight than its simple words suggested. Yes. She avoided his gaze. Thursday was when you first taught me how to play. The significance wasn't lost on Nathan. She remembered not just their song, but the specific day of their lessons. Somehow this made the 13-year gap between them feel both wider and narrower simultaneously. Could we talk? He asked. Just for a few minutes. Sophia hesitated, her eyes scanning the street as if searching for an escape route. I need to get home. I can drive you, he offered immediately, then registered her expression. Or not. Coffee, then. There's a place around the corner still open. She seemed to be waging an internal battle, her composure wavering for the first time. 5 minutes, she finally conceded. That's all I can spare. They walked in silence to a small cafe tucked between high-end boutiques. Nathan noticed how Sophia kept a careful distance between them, her arms crossed protectively across her chest. The easy intimacy they'd once shared had been replaced by an invisible wall he couldn't breach. Inside, Nathan ordered 2 coffees while Sophia claimed a corner table far from the windows. The cafe was nearly empty at this hour, soft jazz playing over hidden speakers. You're successful, she said when he returned with their drinks. I've seen your name in the business pages. Reynolds Innovations, he confirmed. We've grown significantly over the past decade. Congratulations! The word sounded hollow. What about you? He asked. Besides playing at Sapphire, a flicker of something, pride, defiance, crossed her face. I work 3 jobs, the restaurant pays the bills, I teach piano to children on weekends, and I'm completing my music degree finally. That's impressive, he said sincerely. It's necessary, she corrected, a hint of steel entering her voice. Nathan sensed there was more to her story, much more, but he couldn't ignore the question that had haunted him for 13 years. Why did you leave without saying goodbye? The words escaped before he could temper them. Sophia's hand froze mid-reach for her coffee cup. Her eyes, when they met his, contained a mixture of disbelief and long-buried anger. Is that what you think happened? She asked quietly. What else? Could it be? I came back from Oxford for Christmas break and you were gone. No note. No forwarding address. My letters were returned unopened. Your letters? She echoed, her voice laced with confusion. Nathan, I never received any letters from you. I wrote every week for months, he insisted. When I couldn't reach you by phone, I sent them to your apartment. Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension, then to something darker. And what did your mother tell you when you asked about me? The mention of his mother caught Nathan off guard. She said you'd moved on, that you left word with the library that you were relocating out of state for personal reasons. A bitter laugh escaped Sophia. Is that what Victoria told you? The use of his mother's first name, spoken with such thinly veiled contempt, sent a chill through Nathan. Something wasn't adding up. What are you saying? He asked, his coffee forgotten. Sophia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Your mother came to see me, Nathan, right after you left for Oxford. She made it very clear that you had no real future with a girl from my background, as she put it. What? Nathan's voice rose sharply, drawing a glance from the barista. That's not all. Sophia met his gaze unflinchingly. She told me you agreed it was just a summer romance, that you didn't want to be tied down with commitments that would interfere with your promising future. Nathan's world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. I never said anything like that. I didn't believe it at first, Sophia admitted. But then weeks passed without a word from you. No calls, no letters. Eventually. She shrugged, the gesture failing to mask the pain beneath it. Eventually I had to accept it was true. But it wasn't, Nathan insisted, leaning forward. I called your number dozens of times. I wrote you letters every week. When I came back for Christmas break, your landlord said you'd moved out without notice. Sophia's expression softened slightly. Your mother was very thorough. The implication hung between them like a physical presence. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his mind reeling with the possibility that his mother, the woman who had raised him alone after his father died, had deliberately sabotaged his relationship with Sophia. Why would she do that? He asked, though part of him already knew the answer. You were a Reynolds, Sophia said simply. I was a scholarship student working part-time at the library to make rent. You do the math. The class divide had never mattered to Nathan, but it had clearly mattered to Victoria Reynolds, whose family lineage and social standing had always been points of fierce pride. I'm sorry, he said, the words woefully inadequate for the years lost. Sophia nodded, accepting his apology but not absolving him. It wasn't just about me, Nathan. Something in her tone made him go still. What do you mean? She took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her untouched coffee cup. There was another reason your mother was so determined to keep us apart. Nathan waited, a growing sense of dread pooling in his stomach. I was pregnant. 2 words. Just 2 simple words that shifted the foundations of Nathan's carefully constructed life. Pregnant? He repeated numbly. Yes. You had a... He couldn't finish the sentence. A son, Sophia supplied, watching his reaction carefully. His name is Thomas. He's 12 years old. The math wasn't difficult. I have a son, Nathan whispered. The words felt foreign on his tongue. Yes. And my mother knew? She was the first person I told, Sophia confirmed. I thought. She faltered for the first time. I thought she would help me reach you. I was 19, scared, with no family to turn to. Instead, she offered me money to take care of the problem and disappear from your life. Nathan felt physically ill. And did you take it? Anger flashed in Sophia's eyes. No, I refused her money. I told her I would raise the baby on my own, and that's exactly what I did. All these years, Nathan murmured, trying to process the enormity of what he was learning. I didn't know I had a son. I believe you, Sophia said quietly, surprising him. I can see it in your face. You really didn't know? I would have been there, he said fiercely. For both of you. You have to believe that. Maybe. Sophia's gaze was steady. But we'll never know, will we? You went on to build your empire. I worked 3 jobs to put food on the table and clothes on our son's back. We lived in different worlds, Nathan. And now? He asked, his voice hoarse. Now? Sophia glanced at her watch. Now I need to get home to our son. Our son. The words struck Nathan with the force of a physical blow. I want to meet him, he said immediately. Sophia stood, gathering her purse. I need time to think about that. He doesn't know about you, not really. I've never lied to him, but what? But how do you explain to a child that his father never knew he existed? 3 days after their coffee shop conversation, Nathan found himself sitting on a park bench, his normally steady hands betraying his nervousness as he checked his watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. Sophia had finally agreed to let him meet Thomas, though she'd been clear about the conditions. They would meet in a public place. She would be present the entire time, and Nathan would be introduced only as an old friend. Any revelations about his true identity would come later, after they'd had a chance to assess how Thomas might react. Nathan spotted them before they saw him. Sophia walking alongside a lanky boy with a guitar case slung over his shoulder. Even from a distance, the resemblance was unmistakable. Thomas had inherited Nathan's height, his angular jawline, and the way he moved with purpose. But his eyes, those were Sophia's, warm and expressive. Nathan stood as they approached, fighting, the instinct to stare at the son he never knew existed. Hi, he managed, his usual boardroom confidence nowhere to be found. Thomas, this is Nathan, Sophia said calmly. The friend I told you about. The boy shifted his guitar case and extended his hand with a maturity that caught Nathan off guard. Nice to meet you, sir. Just Nathan is fine, he replied, shaking his son's hand for the first time. The simple contact sent a surge of emotion through him that he struggled to conceal. Mom says you know music, Thomas said, curiosity evident in his voice. I used to play, Nathan admitted. Your mother was my best student. Thomas glanced at Sophia with surprise. You never told me you had a teacher. There's a lot about my wild youth you don't know, Sophia replied with a lightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Can I hear you play? Nathan asked, nodding toward the guitar case. Thomas hesitated, looking to his mother, who nodded encouragingly. I'm practicing for my school talent show, he explained, unzipping the case and pulling out an acoustic guitar. That had seen better days. Nathan noticed worn spots on the neck and scratches on the body, signs of frequent use and limited resources. As Thomas began to play, Nathan's breath caught. The boy's technique was untrained, but his natural talent, undeniable. He played with the same intuitive understanding of rhythm and melody that Nathan had possessed at his age, before business demands had pushed music to the periphery of his life. That's an original composition, Sophia explained quietly as Thomas focused on a difficult passage. He writes his own music. Pride swelled in Nathan's chest, an unfamiliar sensation mingled with profound loss for all the years he'd missed. When Thomas finished, Nathan found himself speechless for a moment. That was excellent, he finally said. Really excellent. Thomas ducked his head, pleased but embarrassed by the praise. It still needs work. All good compositions do, Nathan replied. The difference is knowing which parts to refine and which to leave alone. Could you? Thomas glanced again at his mother, then back to Nathan. Could you maybe show me how you would fix the bridge section? It's not flowing right. I'd be honored, Nathan said, careful to maintain composure when all he wanted was to tell this remarkable boy that he was his father. For the next hour, they sat on the park bench, trading the guitar back and forth, speaking the universal language of music. Nathan watched his son's face light up with understanding when he demonstrated a chord progression, saw the concentration when he tried to replicate it. The same expression Nathan had seen countless times in boardroom mirrors. Sophia stood slightly, apart, arms crossed, her expression guarded but not hostile, as she witnessed their instant connection. When Thomas laughed at something Nathan said, a deep, genuine laugh that transformed his serious face, her eyes met Nathan's over their son's head. In that moment of shared wonder, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first fragile bridge across 13 years of absence. The Reynolds estate stood as it always had, imposing, pristine, and cold. Nathan hadn't visited in months, communication with his mother limited to perfunctory phone calls about business matters. Now as he approached the grand entrance, each step felt weighted with purpose. The housekeeper who answered the door couldn't hide her surprise. "Mr. Reynolds, we weren't expecting you." "Is my mother home, Mrs. Collins?" "In the solarium, sir." Nathan strode through the marble foyer, past the formal living room where no one ever lived, and toward the glass-enclosed garden room his mother had claimed as her personal sanctuary. The click of his shoes on the polished floor announced his arrival before he appeared in the doorway. Victoria Reynolds looked up from her tablet, perfectly coiffed silver hair framing a face that expensive creams and subtle procedures had kept remarkably youthful. At 65, she still commanded every room she entered. "Nathan." His name was a statement, not a question. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" He remained standing, declining her gestured invitation to sit. Something in his tone made her set down, her tablet. "Has something happened at the company?" "I saw Sophia Hayes 3 days ago." The name hung in the air between them. If Nathan had harbored any doubt about his mother's guilt, it vanished when he saw the momentary flicker in her eyes. Not surprise, but calculation. "The girl from your university days?" Victoria's voice remained controlled. "How?" "Nostalgic." "I have a son," Nathan stated flatly. Victoria's composure faltered for just a second before she recovered. "I see." "No, Mother, I don't think you do," Nathan continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "I have a 12-year-old son I never knew existed because you made sure of it." "Nathan, did you intercept her letters, her calls?" He cut her off. "Did you lie to me when you said she'd moved away without leaving a forwarding address?" Victoria stood, smoothing her immaculate slacks with manicured hands. "I did what any mother would do to protect her child from making a life-altering mistake." "He's my son." Nathan's control finally broke. "You kept my own child from me for 12 years. She was a waitress from nowhere with nothing to offer but a pretty face and an unexpected pregnancy," Victoria countered, her own voice rising. "You were 19 with your entire future ahead of you. Oxford, the company, everything your father and I built. So you paid her to disappear?" Nathan demanded. "I offered her an opportunity," Victoria corrected. "A generous one." "Which she refused," Nathan said. "Did that surprise you, Mother? That not everyone can be bought?" Victoria's expression hardened. That girl would have trapped you in a mediocre life, tied to a child before you'd even begun to live. Look at what you've accomplished without that burden." "Burden?" Nathan echoed, incredulous. "My son is not a burden. He's a remarkable boy, with extraordinary talent who's grown up without his father because of your manipulation." "And now what?" Victoria's voice turned cold. "You'll throw away everything you've built for some misplaced guilt? For a ready-made family that will inevitably expect access to your fortune?" Nathan's laugh was bitter. "That's all you can imagine, isn't it? That they must want something from me. That real connections can't exist without transaction." "I know the world better than you do," Victoria insisted. "That waitress and her son—" "His name is Thomas," Nathan interrupted. "My son's name is Thomas. You're plotting something. You have that look." Eric leaned against the doorframe of Nathan's office, arms crossed. "What look?" Nathan didn't glance up from his laptop. "The one you had before we acquired Westfield Tech. Determined, but slightly reckless." Eric closed the door behind him. "This is about Sophia and your son, isn't it?" Nathan finally looked up. "I need to fix this, Eric. 12 years can't be recovered, but I can make damn sure I don't miss another day." "Your mother called me," Eric said carefully. "She's concerned you're making impulsive decisions." Of course she did. Nathan's laugh held no humor. Let me guess, she implied that Sophia must be after my money, that I'm being manipulated by guilt? Something like that, Eric admitted, taking a seat opposite Nathan. What's your plan? I need to approach this carefully. Thomas doesn't know I'm his father yet. If the media catches wind of this, Reynolds, CEO's secret love child, it would be a circus. And traumatic for the boy, Eric added, not to mention what it might do to Sophia's reputation. Nathan's expression darkened. She's worked so hard to build a life for them. I won't let my presence destroy that. So what's your strategy? I need allies, Nathan replied. People who know Sophia, who can help me understand how to become part of their lives without disrupting everything she's built. And you have someone in mind? Jenna Miller. She manages the Sapphire restaurant where Sophia works. They seem close. Sophia mentioned she's the one who arranged the piano playing arrangement. Eric pulled out his phone, fingers already tapping. I'll set up a meeting. Discreetly, Nathan emphasized. When have I ever been anything but? Eric raised an eyebrow. 2 days later, Nathan sat in a quiet corner booth of a modest cafe several miles from the financial district, far from the circles where he might be recognized. Jenna Miller entered precisely on time, a woman in her early 40s with shrewd eyes that assessed him thoroughly before she even sat down. Mr. Reynolds. She didn't offer her hand. I don't have much time, so let's cut to it. Why am I here? Thank you for coming, Nathan said. I want to talk about Sophia Hayes. Jenna's expression hardened. If you're here to cause trouble for her, the opposite, Nathan interrupted. I want to help her. And Thomas. After 12 years of silence, her skepticism was palpable. I only learned about Thomas last week, Nathan said quietly. My mother made sure I never knew he existed. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Jenna's posture shifted slightly. Sophia mentioned she'd run into you. She didn't. Share details. She's protective of Thomas, as she should be. Jenna studied him. What do you want from me? Insight, guidance. I want to be part of their lives, but I don't want to disrupt what Sophia has built. I need to understand how to do this right. Jenna considered him for a long moment. Did you know she plays your song every year on Thomas's birthday? The revelation hit Nathan like a physical blow. No. For 12 years, Jenna continued. No matter what shift she worked, she'd come in after hours and play that piece. When I asked why, she said it was so Thomas would have something of his father's, even if he didn't know it. A music consultant? Sophia looked at the business card Nathan had handed her, skepticism evident in her raised eyebrow. For Reynolds Innovations? They sat in the same cafe where they'd had their first real conversation after 13 years apart. 2 weeks had passed since Nathan met Thomas, and he'd seen his son twice more. Careful, supervised visits that left him craving more connection. We're launching a new line of audio technology, Nathan explained. High-end headphones and speakers designed for musicians and audio professionals. We need someone who understands music from a performer's perspective, not just engineering. And you thought of me. Her tone remained neutral, neither accepting nor rejecting. You're qualified, he said simply. You're completing your music degree, you teach, you perform, and you understand sound in a way most people don't. This feels like charity, Nathan. It's not. His response was firm. This is business. I need someone with your expertise, and you need... He stopped himself. Money? She finished for him, a slight edge to her voice. Professional opportunity, he corrected. The chance to use your talent and knowledge in a field that values it properly. The pay is commensurate with industry standards for consultants. Sophia studied him, weighing his words against potential hidden motives. And this has nothing to do with Thomas? It has everything to do with Thomas, Nathan admitted. And with you. But that doesn't make the position any less legitimate. I want to be part of both your lives, Sophia. This is one way I can do that without disrupting what you've built. She turned the card over in her fingers. I would still keep my jobs, at the restaurant and teaching. Initially, yes, the consulting would be part-time, flexible hours. If it works out, we could discuss a more permanent arrangement. Sophia was silent for a long moment. Thomas liked you, she finally said. The simple statement filled Nathan with disproportionate joy. I liked him too. Very much. He asked about you after we left the park. Wanted to know how I knew you, why you understood music so well. She met his eyes directly. I didn't lie to him, but I didn't tell him everything either. When will we tell him? Nathan asked, the question that had been weighing on him since their first meeting. I don't know, Sophia admitted. It's complicated. He has this idea of his father as someone who didn't know about him, which is true. But he's built a whole narrative around it that protects him from feeling rejected. I would never reject him, Nathan said fiercely. I know that now. Her voice softened. But Thomas has had 12 years to imagine who his father might be. The reality, that you're Nathan Reynolds, CEO of a technology empire, that's a lot for a 12-year-old to process. Nathan nodded, accepting the wisdom in her caution. So we build trust first. Yes. And the consulting position? Sophia took a deep breath. I'll think about it. 3 days later, Sophia accepted the role. Within weeks, she was coming to the Reynolds Innovations campus twice weekly, working with the audio engineering team on their new product line. Nathan kept his distance professionally, allowing her to establish her own reputation within the company. But they began meeting regularly to discuss Thomas. And slowly, carefully, Nathan started building a relationship with his son, first through music lessons arranged by Sophia, then through casual outings that allowed them to know each other without the pressure of revealed paternity. What he couldn't have anticipated was how these careful steps toward his son would reawaken feelings for the mother, feelings that had never truly died, just been buried beneath years of ambition and manufactured indifference. Victoria Reynolds was not a woman who accepted defeat gracefully. Nathan should have remembered that fundamental truth about his mother. Mr. Reynolds, there's a Ms. Carter here to see you, his assistant announced over the intercom. She says it's regarding a personal matter. Nathan didn't recognize the name, but something in his assistant's tone made him uneasy. Send her in. The woman who entered his office was meticulously dressed in designer clothing that somehow still looked slightly wrong on her frame, like someone playing a role they hadn't quite mastered. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for seeing me. She extended a manicured hand. Melissa Carter, lifestyle editor at City Business Journal. Nathan shook her hand with well-practiced corporate courtesy. What can I do for you, Ms. Carter? I'm working on a feature about business leaders balancing work and family life. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We understand you've recently reconnected with a former relationship and discovered you have a son. The blood in Nathan's veins turned to ice. No one outside a small circle knew about Thomas. I'm afraid you've been misinformed, have I? She opened a sleek portfolio, sliding across photographs of Nathan with Thomas and Sophia in the park. These were taken last week. The resemblance between you and the boy is striking. Nathan kept his expression neutral despite the rage building inside him. I don't discuss my personal life with the press, Ms. Carter. That's understandable. She recollected the photos with deliberate slowness. However, our readers find these human interest stories compelling. A powerful CEO discovering a long-lost son, raised by a struggling single mother who works as a waitress. It's quite the narrative. The threat was thinly veiled. Nathan leaned forward. Who gave you these photos? An anonymous source, she replied smoothly. Someone concerned about you being manipulated. His mother. It had to be. This was Victoria's counterattack, threatening to expose Thomas to media scrutiny if Nathan didn't retreat from his newly discovered family. What exactly do you want? Just an exclusive. Your story told your way. Her smile widened. Otherwise, someone else might tell it their way. After showing Ms. Carter out with non-committal promises to consider her proposal, Nathan immediately called Eric into his office and explained the situation. Your mother is playing hardball. Eric said after hearing the details. Using the threat of publicity to drive a wedge between you and Sophia. It won't work, Nathan replied grimly, but I need to warn Sophia. That evening, Nathan drove to Sophia's modest apartment building for the first time. The contrast between her reality and his own struck him forcefully, not the lack of luxury but the warmth. While his penthouse was a monument to minimalist design, her home vibrated with life. Framed sheet music on walls, a weathered upright, piano in the corner, Thomas's school awards proudly displayed. When he told her about the reporter, Sophia sat very still on her worn sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. This was always the risk, she said quietly. Exposure. I'm sorry, Nathan said. My mother. It's not just your mother, Sophia interrupted. Nathan, there's something else you should know. Something that might change how you feel about all of this. What is it? Nathan asked, tension creeping into his voice. Sophia took a deep breath. When I first discovered I was pregnant, I was terrified. 19, alone, no family support. I tried reaching your dorm at Oxford directly, but I couldn't get through. So I went to your mother in desperation. She paused, gathering strength for what came next. While I was there, I met someone else, a graduate student who was visiting your mother to discuss a scholarship program. His name was Michael Donovan. Nathan's brow furrowed. The name was vaguely familiar. Michael was kind to me when your mother was not, Sophia continued. He offered me support, a shoulder to cry on. We became friends. Friends? Nathan repeated, a question in his tone. Yes, friends, Sophia emphasized. But your mother has apparently been suggesting to people that Michael and I were more than that we were romantically involved around the time Thomas was conceived. Nathan felt his stomach drop. She's questioning Thomas's paternity. Yes. Sophia's eyes held his steadily. It's not true, Nathan. Thomas is your son. But your mother is desperate enough to create doubt. I wanted you to hear it from me before someone else suggested it. Do you have any contact with this Michael now? Nathan asked carefully. No. He moved to California years ago. Sophia hesitated. But your mother might have reached out to him. I don't know what she might have offered to get him to corroborate her story. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. This is what she does. Creates doubt, finds leverage, manipulates circumstances until she gets what she wants. A sudden thought struck him. It doesn't matter. What? It doesn't matter, Nathan repeated with growing conviction. Even if there was a question, which I know there isn't, it wouldn't change how I feel about Thomas. These past weeks getting to know him. He's my son, Sophia. In every way that matters. Sophia's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. You have no idea what it means to hear you say that. A knock at the apartment door interrupted them. Sophia wiped her eyes quickly. That's probably Thomas. He was at his friend's house working on a science project. When she opened the door, Thomas stepped in, guitar case in one hand, backpack slung over his shoulder. He froze when he saw Nathan. Hey, he said, surprise evident in his voice. I didn't know you were coming over. Last-minute thing, Nathan explained, trying to sound casual. Your mom and I were discussing the audio project. Thomas nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. At 12, he was becoming perceptive about adult dynamics. Cool. I'm gonna put my stuff away. After he disappeared into his bedroom, Sophia turned to Nathan. We need to tell him soon. He's starting to ask questions. I agree, Nathan said. How about this weekend? We could take him to the lake house, neutral territory away from prying eyes. That sounds good. Sophia nodded. I'll make arrangements at work. What neither of them anticipated was Victoria's determination to control the narrative. 2 nights later, Sophia was scheduled to perform her own compositions at the Sapphire for the first time. A special event Nathan had quietly arranged with Jenna to showcase Sophia's talent. Thomas was backstage, planning to surprise his mother with flowers after her performance. Nathan was running late, delayed by an emergency conference call when Victoria made her move. She arrived at the Sapphire unannounced, elegantly dressed and radiating authority. Using her name and commanding presence, she gained access to the back rooms where Sophia was preparing. "I thought it was time we spoke directly," Victoria announced, entering the small dressing room without knocking. Woman to woman, Sophia stood, surprised but composed. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm performing in 20 minutes. "This won't take long," Victoria said dismissively. "I'm offering you a second chance at what you refused 13 years ago. A very generous settlement in exchange for you and your son leaving Nathan alone." "I've never asked Nathan for money," Sophia replied evenly. "Everyone has a price," Victoria countered. "Name yours. Think of what you could do for the boy. Private schools, music academies, college without debt. All it requires is your discretion and distance." "Thomas needs his father more than he needs private schools," Sophia said firmly. Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Nathan isn't cut out for fatherhood. He's built for boardrooms and business empires, not little league games and homework help. When the novelty wears off, he'll resent the constraints of this ready-made family you're trying to foist on him." What neither woman realized was that Thomas had arrived early with his surprise flowers. Hidden in the hallway, he heard every word, including the unmistakable revelation of Nathan's identity. Thomas dropped the flowers and ran, his mind reeling with what he'd just heard. Nathan Reynolds, the successful businessman who'd been teaching him guitar techniques for weeks, was his father? The father his mother had always described as someone who never knew he existed? He pushed through the restaurant's back exit into the alley, barely aware of where he was going. All he knew was that he needed space to process this revelation that changed everything. Nathan arrived at the Sapphire just in time to see a small figure in a dark jacket rush out the back door. Something in the boy's posture struck him as familiar. "Thomas," he called, but the boy had already disappeared around the corner. Inside, he found Sophia and his mother in a tense standoff. "What did you do?" he demanded of Victoria. Before she could answer, Jenna burst into the room. "Thomas is gone. He left. These." She held up a small bouquet of flowers, now slightly crushed. Understanding dawned on Sophia's face. "He heard us. He knows." The next 2 hours were a blur of frantic searching. Sophia was forced to cancel her performance as she and Nathan combed the surrounding streets. Victoria, recognizing the damage she'd caused, returned to her car with uncharacteristic silence. It was Eric who finally found Thomas, calling Nathan with the location: the old memorial park, near the bandstand. When Nathan and Sophia arrived, they found Thomas sitting alone on a bench, his guitar case beside him, staring at the empty stage where summer concerts were held. They approached cautiously, sitting on either side of him. For several long moments, no one spoke. "This is where you two met, isn't it?" Thomas finally asked, his voice surprisingly steady. "Mom told me once that she met my father in a park where they had free music programs." "Yes," Sophia admitted softly. "This is where we met." Thomas turned to Nathan. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nathan's carefully prepared explanations evaporated in the face of his son's direct question. "I wanted to," he said simply. "We both did. We were trying to find the right time, the right way." "So you've known about me for what? A few weeks? And decided to just show up in my life?" Thomas's voice cracked slightly despite his effort to maintain composure. "I only learned about you the night I saw your mother at the restaurant," Nathan explained. "I never knew she was pregnant when I left for Oxford. I never received any of her messages. If I had known about you, Thomas, I would have been there. Every day." "Your grandmother made sure your father didn't know," Sophia added gently. "And later, when we reconnected, we wanted you to get to know each other before we told you the truth." Thomas absorbed this, his expressive eyes, so like his mother's, reflecting his struggle to reconcile years of wondering with this new reality. "I wrote songs about you," he finally said to Nathan. "Made up stories about who you might be, what you might be doing. Sometimes I pretended you were a musician touring the world, or a scientist discovering important things." Nathan felt his heart constrict. And instead you got a businessman who lost his way with music a long time ago. But you still play, Thomas countered. You still understand it. Because of your mother, Nathan said honestly. She was the one who made music matter to me. Thomas looked between them, these two adults who had created him but lived separate lives for 12 years. So what happens now? 3 months passed. Spring blossomed into summer, bringing with it a new rhythm to their lives. Nathan purchased an apartment in Sophia's neighborhood, not to replace his penthouse, but to be closer to Thomas and ease into a more consistent presence in his son's life. He officially acknowledged his paternity, quietly handling the legal aspects with minimal publicity thanks to Eric's strategic management. Thomas, after his initial shock, embraced having his father in his life with the resilience of youth. Music became their bridge. Weekends spent exploring guitar techniques, Nathan teaching Thomas the fundamentals of composition that he'd once mastered himself, both of them discovering the joy of creating together. Sophia observed this blossoming relationship with a mixture of happiness and carefully guarded caution. The wounds of 13 years weren't easily healed, but seeing Thomas flourish under his father's guidance softened the edges of her long-held resentment. Victoria, however, remained conspicuously absent. After the disastrous confrontation at the Sapphire, she had retreated to her mansion, communicating with Nathan only through brief, formal messages about business matters. Her absence was simultaneously a relief and a lingering shadow over their newfound family dynamic. Then came the call Nathan never expected to receive. Mr. Reynolds? The hospital administrator's voice was professionally calm. Your mother has been admitted following a cardiac episode. She's stable, but the doctors recommend family presence. Nathan found Victoria looking smaller than he remembered, the hospital gown and absence of her usual perfect makeup, stripping away the formidable facade she maintained. For the first time, he saw her as merely human, aging, vulnerable, afraid. You came, she said, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice. Of course I did. Nathan sat beside her bed, maintaining a careful distance. I've lost you, haven't I? The directness of her question caught him off guard. No, Mother, but things have changed. I've drawn boundaries you need to respect if you want to be part of my life and Thomas's. Victoria's expression shifted at the mention of her grandson. The boy, he seems bright. He is, extraordinarily so, especially with music. Like you were, she acknowledged softly. Better than I ever was, Nathan corrected. A heavy silence stretched between them, 13 years of deception and 3 months of estrangement creating a chasm neither quite knew how to bridge. I thought I was protecting you, Victoria finally said. Your father and I worked so hard to build something for you to inherit. I couldn't bear to see you throw it all away. It wasn't your decision to make, Nathan replied, his voice firm but not unkind. You robbed me of 12 years with my son. You robbed Thomas of his father. Victoria turned her face away, but not before Nathan caught the unthinkable, a tear sliding down her cheek. In 48 years, he had never seen his mother cry. The following week brought an unexpected visitor to Victoria's hospital room, Thomas, clutching his portable keyboard, with Sophia waiting anxiously in the hallway. Outside, Thomas insisted. Sophia explained when Nathan found her there. He wanted to meet his grandmother. Inside Victoria's hospital room, Thomas stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, his portable keyboard tucked under his arm. Victoria regarded her grandson with an expression caught between wariness and wonder. Hello, Thomas, she said, her usual commanding tone softened by medication and the unexpected nature of this visit. Hi. He shifted from one foot to the other. Mom says you're my grandmother. Victoria's eyes flicked to the doorway where Sophia stood, then back to the boy. Yes, I am. I brought my keyboard, Thomas continued, holding it up. Nathan, told me that you used to play piano too. A flash of surprise crossed Victoria's face at this shared detail. I did, many years ago, before the business became all-consuming. That's what he said happened to him too. Thomas approached cautiously and set his keyboard on the rolling hospital tray. "Would you like to hear something I wrote?" Victoria's carefully maintained composure wavered visibly. "You compose your own music?" Thomas nodded. "Dad's been helping me structure it better, but I've been writing since I was 8. "I would very much like to hear it," Victoria said, the formality of her speech unable to mask her genuine interest. Thomas played a piece that combined classical structure with modern rhythms, a composition that bore the unmistakable influence of both Nathan's technical precision and Sophia's emotional depth. As his fingers moved across the keys, Victoria watched with widening eyes, recognizing the Reynolds talent that had skipped a generation in its purest form. When Thomas finished, Victoria was silent for a long moment. "That was remarkable," she finally said. "You have extraordinary talent." "Thanks." Thomas smiled tentatively. "It's still not quite right in the middle section." "Perhaps a minor 7th there instead," Victoria suggested, pointing to a spot on the keyboard. "It would create more tension before the resolution." Thomas tried the suggestion, his eyes lighting up at the improvement. "That's perfect." For the next 15 minutes, grandmother and grandson discussed music theory, finding unexpected common ground. Nathan and Sophia watched from the doorway, equally stunned by this unpredictable connection. As Thomas packed up his keyboard, Victoria spoke directly to him, without the calculated manipulation that had characterized her entire life. "I hope you might visit again, Thomas, perhaps when I'm feeling stronger." "Sure," he replied with the straightforward acceptance unique to children. "Get better soon, grandmother." After Thomas stepped out, Victoria looked at Sophia standing in the doorway. "May I speak with you? Alone?" Nathan exchanged a questioning glance with Sophia, who nodded reassuringly. "I'll be fine." When they were alone, Victoria spoke words Sophia had never expected to hear. "I was wrong." The simple admission hung in the air between them. Victoria Reynolds, who had never admitted error in her life, acknowledging her greatest mistake. "I thought I was protecting my son and our family legacy," Victoria continued with effort. "Instead, I nearly destroyed his chance at real happiness, and I denied myself the knowledge of my grandson." "Thomas has your musical ear," Sophia observed quietly. "Yes." A ghost of a smile touched Victoria's lips. "He gets that from both sides, it seems." "Both sides," Sophia echoed, acknowledging what Victoria was finally accepting. That Thomas was a Reynolds by blood and birthright. "I don't expect forgiveness," Victoria said pragmatically. "But I would like the opportunity to know my grandson, if you'll permit it. On your terms, of course." Sophia studied the woman who had once tried to buy her silence, now humbled by age and circumstance. "Thomas forms his own opinions about people. If you're genuine with him, he'll give you a chance. That's all any of us can ask for." 4 months later, Nathan stood in the wings of the Riverside Concert Hall, watching as final preparations were made for the evening's event. What had begun as a small fundraiser for youth music education had evolved into something much larger under his direction. A charity gala featuring promising young musicians from underserved communities, with all proceeds funding scholarships and instruments. And headlining the event was Sophia, finally taking the stage professionally, as she had dreamed of doing since she was 19. "Nervous?" he asked, approaching her as she reviewed her music one last time. "Terrified," she admitted with a smile that belied her words, but in the best possible way. In the months since their family's reconciliation had begun, Nathan had watched Sophia flourish. She had reduced her restaurant hours to focus on the consulting position, which had evolved into a full-time role as creative director for the audio division. Her musical expertise had proven invaluable, earning her the respect of engineers and executives alike. But more significant was the change in her confidence, the way she carried herself now, no longer bent by the weight of solo parenting and financial struggle. She stood taller, laughed more freely, and allowed herself to dream again of the musical career she had once abandoned. I have something for you, Nathan said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I've been carrying this around for 13 years. Sophia's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a delicate platinum ring with a small, perfect sapphire. You kept it all this time? I bought it the week before I left for Oxford, he explained. I was planning to propose when I came back for Christmas break. Nathan, Sophia began, her voice thick with emotion. I'm not asking yet, he clarified quickly. I know we're still finding our way back to each other, but I wanted you to know that even then, I knew what we had was worth building a life around. I still believe that, Sophia. More than ever. She touched the ring gently, tears glistening in her eyes. Keep it safe a little longer, she whispered, but not too long. From the auditorium came the sound of the orchestra warming up. The stage manager approached with a 5-minute warning. Break a leg, Nathan said, squeezing her hand. Thomas and I will be right in the front row. Victoria, too. Sophia nodded, taking a deep breath as she prepared to take the stage. The future stretched before them, not perfect, still complicated, but full of possibilities that had once seemed impossibly lost. And as the curtain began to rise, Nathan knew with absolute certainty that the melody that had once brought them together would continue to play, stronger and more beautiful for having been interrupted. The garden of Nathan's new home, a spacious but unpretentious house halfway between his corporate world and Sophia's neighborhood, bloomed with early summer flowers. White chairs arranged in intimate semicircles faced an arch woven with blue hydrangeas and white roses, beneath which stood a string quartet tuning their instruments. This wasn't the lavish society wedding Victoria might once have envisioned for her son. But as she took her seat in the front row, her expression held genuine contentment rather than resignation. Beside her sat Eric, who had become an unexpected ally in rebuilding bridges between the generations. Nervous? Eric asked Nathan, straightening his friend's tie as they waited near the house. Not about marrying Sophia, Nathan replied honestly. About the speech Thomas and I prepared? Absolutely terrified. Thomas emerged from the house in a suit that matched his father's, his hair carefully combed though still resisting complete control. At 13, he stood nearly as tall as Sophia now, growing into his father's height with adolescent speed. Mom's ready, he announced. Jenna's helping with the final touches. The simple ceremony began with traditional music, but as Sophia appeared at the garden path on Thomas's arm, her escort by his own insistent request, the quartet transitioned into the melody Nathan had composed for her all those years ago, now arranged as a wedding march. Sophia's eyes met Nathan's across the garden, a private smile passing between them at this musical declaration of their journey. Instead of the conventional exchange of vows, Nathan and Sophia had chosen something uniquely theirs. After the minister's brief words, they turned toward the small baby grand piano that had been positioned beneath a flowering cherry tree. Together, they sat at the bench, and without speaking, began to play. The piece they had composed together over the past year told their story through music, beginning with Nathan's original melody, transforming through variations that spoke of separation and longing, introducing discordant elements that resolved into something more complex and beautiful than the original theme. Their fingers moved in perfect synchronicity, a conversation without words that brought tears to the eyes of even the least sentimental guests. As the piece reached its crescendo, Thomas stepped forward, lifting his guitar to join his parents in the final movement, their three instruments creating a harmony that had once seemed impossible. When the final notes faded, the garden remained, silent for a breathless moment before erupting in applause. Later, as twilight settled over the reception, Victoria approached Sophia, who stood watching Nathan and Thomas engrossed in conversation with a young music student who had received the first Reynolds Hayes scholarship. You've given my son something I never could, Victoria said quietly. A family built on love rather than obligation. Sophia turned, surprised by the uncharacteristic vulnerability in her mother-in-law's voice. We all contributed to this family, Victoria. Even you. Victoria raised an eyebrow questioningly. Without your interference, we might have settled into a comfortable but ordinary life. Sophia explained. Instead, we've all been forced to examine what truly matters, to fight for it, to forgive. That's created something stronger than what we might have had otherwise. Victoria considered this perspective, one that offered redemption without excusing her actions. Perhaps you're right, though I wouldn't recommend my methods to others. A small smile ghosted across her lips, an acknowledgement of her own growth. The evening deepened, guests began to depart. Thomas, exhausted but happy, sat with his grandmother, showing her his latest composition on his tablet. Nathan found Sophia standing alone at the edge of the garden, gazing at the stars emerging in the clear night sky. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Reynolds?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Not one," she replied, leaning into him. "Though, I'm keeping Hayes professionally. I've worked too hard establishing my reputation in the industry to surrender it now." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Nathan assured her. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as fireflies began to illuminate the garden with their intermittent glow. "I had a thought," Nathan said eventually. "The Reynolds Foundation has been focused on corporate giving for years. What if we redirected some of its resources toward music education? Not just scholarships, but community programs like the one where we met." Sophia's eyes brightened. Programs that could reach kids who might never have formal lessons otherwise. "Exactly. We could start right here in the city, then expand nationally if it proves successful." "I love it," she said, then laughed suddenly. "Listen to us. On our wedding night, planning work projects." "Not work," Nathan corrected, his voice soft. "Purpose. Something we build together, like the music we played today." From the patio came the sound of Thomas playing his guitar, a gentle improvisation around the melody that had brought his parents together and ultimately led to his existence. Victoria sat nearby, her head tilted in appreciation of her grandson's talent. "We've come full circle," Sophia observed. "Though the circle is larger now, with room for all of us." Nathan nodded, squeezing her hand. The journey from that first night at the Sapphire restaurant, when a forgotten melody had reignited what time and deception had failed to extinguish, had been neither straight nor simple. There had been pain, confrontation, difficult truths, and hard-won forgiveness. But as they rejoined their son and extended family beneath the star-filled sky, the melody continued, stronger and richer for having endured the silence between its movements.